The rustling of pine needles under her boots came to an abrupt halt as Olivia Evans froze at the edge of the clearing. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the small cabin, illuminating the figure of a man on the porch, his back to her, as he worked meticulously on something she couldn't quite make out. It was 1876 in the Montana Territory, and Olivia had been wandering these woods for 3 days, searching for her uncle's homestead after the stagecoach had left her at the wrong stop. The man hadn't noticed her yet. His shoulders, broad and strong beneath a worn chambray shirt, moved rhythmically as he sanded what appeared to be a wooden frame. As Olivia stepped closer, the dried leaves crunching beneath her feet, she realized what he was crafting: a baby's cradle, its curved rockers already gleaming with fresh varnish. The sound alerted him, and he turned with the swift alertness of someone accustomed to danger. His hand moved instinctively toward his holster before registering that she posed no threat. Olivia found herself staring into eyes the color of a summer storm, gray-blue and filled with a sorrow so profound it took her breath away. "I'm sorry," she stammered, clutching her travel bag tighter. "I didn't mean to intrude. I'm looking for the Evans homestead." The man studied her for a long moment, his expression guarded. He couldn't have been more than 30, but the lines etched around his eyes spoke of experiences that had aged him beyond his years. A faded scar ran along his jawline, disappearing into a neatly trimmed beard the color of burnished copper. "Evans' place is about 5 miles east," he finally replied, his voice rough as if from disuse. "You're a fair piece off course." Olivia nodded, embarrassment washing over her. "The stagecoach driver said it was just beyond the creek, but I must have taken a wrong turn." His gaze returned to the cradle, his fingers running almost reverently over the smooth wood. Something in the gesture made Olivia's heart constrict. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "The craftsmanship is remarkable." The man's shoulders stiffened, and for a moment, she thought he might not respond. Then he sighed, a sound so full of pain that Olivia wished she could take back her words. "It's for the child I lost," he said simply, and the raw honesty in those few words struck Olivia like a physical blow. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the distant call of a whippoorwill and the gentle scrape of sandpaper against wood as he resumed his work. "I'm Olivia Evans," she offered, unsure what else to say. "I've come to stay with my Uncle Thomas." "Grant Forrester," he replied without looking up. "Your uncle's a good man. Helped me settle this land when I first arrived." The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. Olivia glanced anxiously at the darkening forest. The thought of finding her way through unfamiliar woods as night fell was daunting. As if reading her thoughts, Grant spoke. "It'll be dark soon. Not safe for a woman alone. You can stay here tonight, and I'll take you to your uncle's at first light." Olivia hesitated. She'd been raised in Boston, where proper young ladies didn't stay unchaperoned in the homes of strange men. But this wasn't Boston, and the alternative was potentially far more dangerous. "Thank you," she said. "I would appreciate that." Grant nodded, standing to his full height at least 6 feet. She estimated and carefully covered the cradle with a worn canvas tarp. "Come inside. There's stew keeping warm." The cabin was small but meticulously kept. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, a cooking pot suspended over glowing embers. A single bed stood in one corner, a trunk at its foot. A table with 2 chairs occupied the center of the room, and shelves lined with books surprised Olivia. Not what she expected in a frontier cabin. "You can take the bed," Grant said, ladling stew into a bowl. "I'll sleep by the fire." "I couldn't possibly. It's no hardship," he interrupted. "I've slept on worse." Olivia accepted the bowl he offered, the rich aroma of venison and herbs making her realize how hungry she was. They ate in silence, the crackling of the fire the only sound. Occasionally, she caught him studying her when he thought she wasn't looking, his expression unreadable. "How long have you been out here?" she asked, desperate to break the silence. Grant set down his spoon. "For years now. Alone." Something flickered across his face, pain, perhaps, or anger. Not always. Olivia sensed there was more to the story, but his tone discouraged further questions. Instead, she told him about Boston, about her father's death that had prompted her journey west, about her hopes to help her uncle with his small cattle operation. Grant listened without interruption, his eyes occasionally meeting hers before quickly looking away. After dinner, he gave her a nightshirt, my late wife's, he explained briefly and turned his back while she changed behind a makeshift screen. The garment smelled of lavender and sunshine, as if it had been carefully preserved. As promised, Grant made a pallet for himself near the fireplace while Olivia took the bed. Sleep eluded her, however. Through the dimness, she could make out his silhouette, one arm thrown over his face, his breathing too measured to indicate sleep. "Mr. Forrester," she whispered. "The child you mentioned. I'm truly sorry for your loss." For a long moment, she thought he hadn't heard or chose to ignore her. Then his voice came through the darkness, so quiet she almost missed it. His name was Samuel. He would have been 2 years old next month. Olivia's heart ached for this stranger's pain. And his mother? Emma died bringing him into this world. The words were flat, emotionless, as if he'd said them so many times they'd lost their power to hurt him. But Olivia knew better. Then why? She hesitated. Why build a cradle now? Grant's silhouette shifted, sitting upright. In the dying firelight, his face was half in shadow, half illuminated, making him look like something between man and ghost. Because I promised her I would. Before she died, Emma made me promise to build our son a cradle with my own hands. I was too. His voice caught. I was too angry at God, at the world, at myself to do it then. But a promise is a promise, even if it's years late. Olivia found herself blinking back tears. I think it's beautiful that you're honoring her wish. Grant made no reply, and eventually, his breathing deepened, signaling sleep had finally claimed him. Olivia lay awake much longer, wondering what kind of man kept a promise to a wife for years dead, crafting a cradle for a child who would never use it. Morning came with the sound of a rooster's crow and the smell of coffee brewing. Olivia opened her eyes to find Grant already dressed, his back to her as he tended to the stove. Sunlight streamed through the cabin's single window, illuminating motes of dust dancing in the air. "There's water in the basin if you want to wash," he said without turning. "We should leave within the hour if we want to reach your uncle's by midday." Olivia dressed quickly behind the screen, grateful for the opportunity to freshen up after days of travel. When she emerged, Grant had set out a simple breakfast of cornbread and honey. "Thank you for your hospitality," she said, taking a seat at the table. He nodded, his eyes meeting hers briefly before focusing on his plate. In the harsh morning light, she could see the toll grief had taken on him more clearly, the premature silver at his temples, the deep furrows between his brows. After breakfast, Grant saddled a chestnut mare for Olivia and his own dappled gray gelding. He worked efficiently, his movements betraying years of experience with horses. Before mounting, he paused at the porch, casting one last glance at the tarp-covered cradle. The journey to her uncle's homestead was largely silent. Grant rode slightly ahead, occasionally pointing out landmarks or naming plants and animals they passed. Olivia found herself studying his profile, the straight line of his nose, the determined set of his jaw. There was a quiet dignity about him that spoke of inner strength, despite the tragedy that had marked his life. "May I ask you something, Mr. Forrester?" she ventured after they'd been riding for nearly an hour. He glanced back at her, one eyebrow raised in question. "What will you do with the cradle when it's finished?" Grant's hands tightened on the reins, and for a moment, Olivia feared she'd overstepped. But then his shoulders relaxed. "There's a family in town, the Clarks. They're expecting their 5th child, and times are hard for them. I thought." He cleared his throat. "I thought Samuel wouldn't mind if another baby used it." Olivia felt a rush of warmth toward this complicated man. "That's very generous." "It's not generosity," he corrected quietly. "It's purpose. Without purpose, grief consumes you." The wisdom in those words struck Olivia deeply. She'd felt adrift since her father's passing, unsure of her place in the world. Perhaps she, too, needed to find purpose. They crested a hill, and below them stretched a modest homestead, a white-painted house, a barn, and various outbuildings surrounded by fenced pastures where cattle grazed. Smoke curled from the chimney, and in the yard, a gray-haired man split wood. "Uncle Thomas," Olivia breathed, relief washing over her. Her uncle looked up at the sound of approaching hooves, squinting against the sun. Recognition dawned on his weathered face, followed quickly by concern. "Olivia, We expected you 2 days ago. I was about to organize a search party. Thomas called, setting down his axe and hurrying toward them. The stagecoach left me at Willow Creek instead of Pine Junction, Olivia explained as Grant helped her dismount. Mr. Forrester was kind enough to offer shelter for the night and guide me here. Thomas clasped Grant's hand warmly. I'm much obliged to you, Grant. The thought of Olivia lost in these woods has had me sick with worry. Grant nodded. Any man would have done the same. Nonsense. Most men around here wouldn't notice a lady in distress if she was standing right in front of them. Thomas turned to Olivia, embracing her tightly. Your aunt's inside, beside herself with worry. Go on in while I have a word with Grant. Olivia hesitated, feeling strangely reluctant to part ways with the somber cowboy who had come to her aid. Thank you again, Mr. Forrester. Grant touched the brim of his hat. Madam. As she walked toward the house, Olivia couldn't help glancing back. Grant and her uncle stood in earnest conversation, Thomas's hand on the younger man's shoulder in what looked like a gesture of comfort. There was a story there, she was certain, and she found herself hoping she'd have the chance to learn it. Aunt Martha fussed over Olivia for the remainder of the day, drawing her a hot bath and preparing her favorite childhood foods despite Olivia's protests that she hadn't had them in years and couldn't possibly remember. The older woman was clearly delighted to have female company after years of living with only Thomas for companionship. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Olivia finally found an opportunity to ask about Grant Forrester. Terrible tragedy, her aunt sighed, her knitting needles clicking rhythmically. Emma was such a lovely girl, daughter of the schoolteacher in town. Grant courted her for nearly 2 years before they married. They were so happy when they found out about the baby. What happened? Olivia asked softly. The birth was difficult. By the time the doctor arrived from town, it was too late for Emma. The baby little Samuel seemed healthy at first, but he took ill a few months later. Pneumonia. Grant rode through a blizzard trying to get the doctor, but Martha shook her head sadly. Some say he never spoke more than necessary after that day. Keeps to himself, works his land, occasionally helps neighbors when needed, but otherwise, he might as well be a ghost. Olivia thought of the cradle, lovingly crafted years after it would serve its intended purpose. He doesn't seem like a ghost to me. Wounded, yes, but very much alive. Her aunt gave her a shrewd look. Just be careful, dear. A man carrying that much pain isn't easy to love. Olivia felt her cheeks grow warm. I wasn't suggesting, of course not, Martha said with a knowing smile. Now, tell me more about your journey west. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity as Olivia settled into life on the homestead. She learned to milk cows, tend the vegetable garden, and even tried her hand at making cheese under her aunt's patient tutelage. The physical work was exhausting but satisfying in a way her sheltered Boston life had never been. She saw Grant twice during that time, once at Sunday service in the small-town church, where he sat alone in the back pew and left before the final hymn, and again at the general store, where they exchanged brief pleasantries before he tipped his hat and departed. Each time, Olivia found herself watching him go, wondering about the man who built a cradle for a child long gone. It was mid-June when disaster struck the Evans homestead. A sudden illness swept through the cattle herd, taking 8 animals in as many days. The veterinarian from the next county overdiagnosed a rare condition that required expensive medicine and recommended culling the infected animals before the entire herd was lost. We'll lose everything if this spreads, Thomas confessed to Olivia one evening, his face haggard with worry. The bank loan on this place isn't paid off yet. If we can't make the next payment, there must be something we can do, Olivia insisted. Her inheritance from her father was substantial, but it was tied up in a trust until her 25th birthday or her marriage, whichever came first. At 22, she had no immediate access to funds that could save her uncle's farm. The next morning, Olivia made a decision. Saddling the mare her uncle had given her for daily use, she rode the 5 miles to Grant's homestead. She found him in the barn, repairing a harness, his sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle from years of hard work. Miss Evans, he said, surprise evident in his voice as he stood. Is everything all right? Olivia explained the situation, watching his expression grow increasingly concerned. Your uncle is a proud man, Grant said when she'd finished. He won't easily accept help. That's why I'm here. Olivia admitted. He respects you. If you offered to buy a few head of his healthy cattle just until the crisis passes, he might accept. Grant's eyes narrowed. And where would the money for this arrangement come from? Your uncle knows my circumstances as well as anyone. Olivia squared her shoulders. From me. My father left me well provided for, but I can't access the funds directly. However, I could sign over a portion to you, which you could then use to help my uncle. That's a complicated arrangement that requires a great deal of trust, Miss Evans. I know, she said simply. But I trust you, Mr. Forrester. Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, perhaps, or something deeper. Why? The question caught her off guard. Why did she trust this near stranger with what amounted to her future security? The answer came to her with surprising clarity. Because a man who keeps a promise to build a cradle for a child he's lost is a man of integrity. And right now, I need someone with integrity. Grant studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he nodded. I'll speak to your uncle, but I won't take your money. Mr. Forrester, I have savings, he interrupted. Not much, but enough. Emma's father left me a small inheritance when he passed last year. I haven't touched it. I can't let you. You're not letting me do anything, Grant said firmly. Your uncle helped me establish my homestead claim when I first arrived. I owe him a debt I can never fully repay. Olivia wanted to argue further, but the set of his jaw told her it would be futile. Instead, she found herself saying, the cradle. Is it finished? Something like surprise crossed his face, followed by a softening around his eyes. Nearly. Would you like to see it? He led her to the porch where the cradle now stood uncovered, its wood gleaming golden in the sunlight. The craftsmanship was even more impressive. Up close, intricate carvings of wildflowers adorned the headboard, and the rockers curved in perfect symmetry. It's magnificent, Olivia breathed, running her fingers along the smooth edge. Your wife would be proud. Emma loved wildflowers, Grant said quietly. Said they were God's way of painting joy across the prairie. Olivia glanced up to find him watching her, something vulnerable in his expression that made her heart beat faster. For a brief moment, she caught a glimpse of the man he might have been before tragedy reshaped him younger, perhaps, with laughter lines instead of those carved by grief. Will you come to dinner tonight? She asked impulsively. To discuss the cattle arrangement with my uncle? Grant hesitated, then nodded. I'll be there at sundown. True to his word, Grant arrived as the sun dipped below the horizon, dressed in what appeared to be his Sunday best, a clean white shirt, dark waistcoat, and his usual worn but polished boots. He'd trimmed his beard and combed his hair, and Olivia felt an unexpected flutter in her chest at the sight of him. Thomas was surprised to see Grant, but welcomed him warmly. When the reason for his visit was explained, carefully framed as Grant's desire to expand his small herd using some of Thomas's prized stock, her uncle's pride visibly warred with practical necessity. I don't take charity, Grant, Thomas said gruffly over Martha's excellent beef stew. It's not charity, Grant replied evenly. It's an investment. Your breeding stock is superior to mine. I'm willing to pay above market price for the advantage. The men negotiated terms while Olivia and her aunt exchanged hopeful glances. By the end of the evening, they had reached an agreement that would allow Thomas to purchase the necessary medicine and save his herd while maintaining his dignity. As Grant prepared to leave, Olivia walked him to where his horse was tethered. The night was clear, stars speckling the vast Montana sky like diamond dust. Thank you, she said softly. What you're doing for my family. It means everything. Grant adjusted his saddle, his profile illuminated by the lantern she carried. Your uncle's a good man. And so was your father, by all accounts. You knew my father? Olivia asked, surprised. Not personally, but Thomas speaks highly of him. Says you have his spirit stubborn as a mule, but with a heart as big as Montana. Olivia laughed softly. That sounds like something Uncle Thomas would say. Grant turned to face her, and in the lantern light, his eyes held a warmth she hadn't seen before. He's right about the heart part. The compliment, delivered so matter-of-factly, caught her off guard. Before she could respond, Grant mounted his horse in one fluid motion. Would you like to see the cradle again when it's completely finished? He asked, looking down at her. I'll be delivering it to the Clarks next week. I'd like that very much, Olivia replied, trying to ignore the way her pulse quickened. Grant nodded, touching his hat brim. Good night, Miss Evans. Olivia, she corrected. Please call me Olivia. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Good night, Olivia. As she watched him ride away, Olivia knew with sudden clarity that she was in danger of falling in love with Grant Forrester, a man whose heart was still buried alongside his wife and child. The days that followed were busy with nursing the cattle back to health. The medicine worked, and gradually, the herd began to recover. True to his word, Grant purchased 12 head of Thomas's healthiest cattle, paying a sum that made her uncle's eyebrows rise nearly to his hairline. That man paid nearly double what they're worth, Thomas muttered after Grant had driven the animals to his own property. Either he's lost his mind, or what? Olivia prompted when her uncle trailed off. Thomas gave her a speculative look. Or he's got reasons beyond business for being generous. Olivia felt her cheeks warm. Don't be ridiculous, Uncle. Mr. Forrester is simply being kind. Grant Forrester hasn't been simply kind to anyone in years, Thomas replied. He does what's necessary, what's honorable, but he doesn't go out of his way, not since Emma and the baby. Olivia made no reply, but her uncle's words followed her throughout the day, kindling a small flame of hope she hardly dared acknowledge. 5 days later, a messenger boy from town delivered a note from Grant, inviting her to see the completed cradle before he delivered it to the Clark family. The message was brief and formal, but Olivia's heart leaped at the sight of his neat, precise handwriting. Her aunt helped her dress in her best day dress, a modest creation of blue cotton that brought out the color in her eyes, and watched with knowing amusement as Olivia fussed with her hair. Just be careful, Martha cautioned as Olivia prepared to leave. Grant Forrester might be ready to live again, or he might just be taking his first steps back toward the world of the living. Either way, it won't be an easy road. I'm just going to see a cradle, Aunt Martha, Olivia protested weakly. Her aunt simply smiled. Of course you are, dear. The 5-mile ride to Grant's homestead seemed shorter than before, the June day perfect with blue skies and wildflowers dotting the prairie. Olivia found Grant on the porch, applying a final coat of varnish to the cradle. He looked up as she approached, and something in his expression made her breath catch a warmth, a welcome that hadn't been there before. You came, he said, rising to his feet. Of course, Olivia replied, dismounting with the ease of someone who'd grown accustomed to daily riding. I wouldn't have missed seeing the finished piece. Grant helped her up the porch steps, his hand gentle at her elbow. The cradle stood in the center of the porch, gleaming in the sunlight. The final touches had been added since she last saw it. A small carved bird in flight adorned each corner post, and the inside was lined with soft padding covered in cream-colored fabric. It's even more beautiful than I remembered, Olivia said softly, trailing her fingers along the smooth wood. I added the birds last night, Grant explained. Emma always said angels watched over sleeping children in the form of birds. The intimacy of the detail, this glimpse into his marriage, into the beliefs he'd shared with his wife, moved Olivia deeply. She sounds like she was a wonderful woman. She was, Grant agreed. Then, after a pause, he added, I think you would have liked each other. The comment surprised her. It was the first time he'd spoken of Emma as someone who might exist alongside Olivia's world rather than belonging to a past too painful to revisit. I'm sure I would have, she said carefully. Grant gestured toward the cabin door. I made lunch. Nothing fancy, just rabbit stew, but it's hot. Inside, the cabin looked different in daylight, brighter, more welcoming than it had seemed that first night. Fresh wildflowers stood in a jar on the table, which was set for two with what appeared to be his best dishes. You've gone to a lot of trouble, Olivia observed as he pulled out a chair for her. Grant shrugged, though she detected a hint of self-consciousness in the gesture. It's not often I have company, especially company I look forward to. The admission, simple as it was, warmed Olivia more than the stew, which was surprisingly good. They talked as they ate, real conversation this time, not the careful, distant exchanges of their previous encounters. Grant told her about his childhood in Pennsylvania, his journey west after the war, his dreams of building a cattle operation to rival her uncle's someday. Olivia shared stories of Boston society, her love of literature, her secret ambition to write stories of frontier life. After lunch, Grant showed her around his property, the small herd of cattle that now included those purchased from her uncle, the vegetable garden struggling valiantly against the Montana elements, the apple saplings he'd planted last year. In 5 years, these will bear fruit, he explained, touching one of the small trees. Emma loved apples. I thought. He paused, looking slightly embarrassed. I thought our children would climb these trees someday. The casual mention of future children who would never exist now struck Olivia as profoundly sad. Yet there was something hopeful in the fact that he'd planted trees meant to bear fruit years in the future. Despite everything, some part of Grant Forrester still believed in tomorrows. They're going to be beautiful trees, she said softly. They walked back toward the cabin in comfortable silence. As they reached the porch, Grant cleared his throat. I'm delivering the Cradle to the Clarks tomorrow, he said. Would you like to come with me? Their place is near town. We could have dinner at the hotel afterward, if you'd like. The invitation, unexpected and tentative, made Olivia's heart flutter. I'd love to, she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. What time shall I be ready? They arranged to meet at her uncle's homestead the following morning. As Grant helped her mount her horse, his hands lingered at her waist a moment longer than necessary. Thank you for coming today, he said, looking up at her. It's been good to have company. Olivia smiled down at him, suddenly bold. Perhaps you'll have to get used to it, Mr. Forrester. A slow smile spread across his face, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him, transforming his features. Perhaps I will, Miss Evans. The ride home was a blur, Olivia's mind filled with the image of that smile, with the possibilities it represented. For the first time since arriving in Montana, she felt truly hopeful about her future here. Thomas and Martha exchanged knowing glances when Olivia announced that Grant had invited her to accompany him to town the next day, but mercifully, they asked no questions. Her aunt merely helped her select an appropriate outfit, a sage green traveling dress with minimal bustle, practical yet flattering, and advised her to wear her hair partly up, to show off that lovely neck of yours. Grant arrived precisely at the appointed hour, driving a freshly painted wagon with the Cradle carefully secured in the back, wrapped in clean blankets. He dressed formally again, and Olivia noticed he'd had his hair trimmed since yesterday. The journey to the Clark homestead took most of the morning, but the time passed quickly as they talked. Grant seemed more at ease than she'd ever seen him, occasionally pointing out interesting landmarks or sharing stories about the early days of settlement in the area. The Clarks lived in a modest cabin similar to Grant's, though considerably more crowded, with the presence of 4 children ranging from toddler to 10 years old. Mrs. Clark, heavily pregnant and tired-looking, greeted them warmly, her face lighting up when Grant unveiled the Cradle. Oh, Mr. Forrester, she breathed, running her hands over the polished wood. It's too fine for the likes of us. We can't possibly accept. Please, Grant interrupted gently. It would mean a great deal to me to know it's being used by a child who's wanted and loved. Mrs. Clark's eyes filled with tears as she looked from the Cradle to Grant. My Robert told me about your loss. I'm so sorry. Grant nodded, his expression momentarily tight with suppressed emotion. The Cradle was a promise to my wife. She would be pleased to know it's found a home with your family. Mr. Clark, a thin man with kind eyes, shook Grant's hand vigorously. We'll treasure it, sir. And when our little one outgrows it, we'll pass it along to another family in need, if that suits you. That would be perfect, Grant agreed. A Cradle should rock many babies throughout its life. Olivia, watching the exchange, felt a swell of admiration for this man who had transformed his grief into an act of generosity. As they took their leave, Grant helped her back into the wagon, his movements gentle and attentive. That was a beautiful thing you did, she said as they headed toward town, giving new purpose to something that represented such pain for you. Grant was quiet for a moment, his hands steady on the reins. For a long time, I thought the only way to honor Emma and Samuel was to keep my grief pristine, untouched, unchanged. But lately, I've started to think that maybe moving forward isn't a betrayal. It's not, Olivia assured him softly. I'm certain they would want you to find happiness again. He glanced at her, his expression unreadable. Perhaps. In town, Grant secured their horses at the livery and offered Olivia his arm as they walked toward the hotel restaurant, the finest establishment in the small settlement. Several people greeted them as they passed, surprise evident in their expressions at seeing the reclusive Grant Forrester in the company of a young woman. The hotel dining room was modestly elegant, with white tablecloths and actual glass windows, a luxury in a frontier town. Grant ordered for both of them, selecting the finest items on the limited menu. As they waited for their meal, Olivia noticed he seemed increasingly nervous, fidgeting with his silverware and glancing around the room. "Is everything all right?" she asked. Grant sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I haven't done this in a very long time," he admitted. "Taken a lady to dinner, I mean. Not since Emma." The vulnerability in his confession touched Olivia deeply. "You're doing just fine," she assured him, impulsively reaching across the table to touch his hand. Grant looked down at their hands, then slowly turned his palm up to clasp hers. "Olivia," he said quietly, "I need to be honest with you." Her heart stuttered. "About what?" "When you first came to my homestead, I was not in a good place. Building that cradle was stirring up memories I tried to bury. But something about you." He paused, seeming to search for words. "Something about you made me want to try again. To live again, not just exist." Olivia felt warmth spreading through her chest. "I'm glad. But I don't know if I can offer you what you deserve," he continued, his expression troubled. "I've been alone a long time. I'm not sure I remember how to be anything else." "We can learn together," she said simply. "I'm not asking for promises, Grant. Just possibilities." His eyes, meeting hers across the table, held a mixture of hope and fear that reflected her own emotions perfectly. "Possibilities," he repeated softly. "I think I can manage that." Their dinner arrived, temporarily halting the conversation, but something had shifted between them. Grant seemed lighter somehow, as if a burden had been partially lifted. They talked of practical things: the recovered cattle herd, the approaching harvest season, the town's plans for a 4th of July celebration. As they drove back to her uncle's homestead under a canopy of stars, Grant reached for her hand again, holding it gently as he guided the horses with his other hand. The simple gesture felt profoundly intimate. At the Evans property, he helped her down from the wagon, his hands lingering at her waist. In the moonlight, his face was half in shadow, but Olivia could see the conflict in his eyes, desire warring with uncertainty. "Thank you for today," she said softly. "For sharing the cradle, the Clarks, everything." Grant nodded, seemingly unable to find words. Then, with deliberate slowness, he leaned forward and pressed his lips to her forehead, a gesture so gentle and reverent that Olivia felt tears spring to her eyes. "Good night, Olivia," he whispered. "Good night, Grant." In the weeks that followed, Grant became a regular visitor at the Evans homestead. He would arrive with practical excuses, helping Thomas repair fences, advising on the treatment of a sick horse, delivering fresh venison, but always found time to sit with Olivia on the porch, talking until the sun set and the stars emerged. Sometimes they rode together across the rolling prairie, Grant pointing out plants and animals, teaching Olivia the survival skills needed in this untamed territory. Other times, they simply sat side by side reading. Grant had lent her several of his precious books, treasured possessions carried across the country in his saddlebags years ago. July brought scorching heat and the town's Independence Day celebration. Grant arrived early to escort Olivia, Thomas, and Martha, his wagon freshly cleaned for the occasion. Olivia wore her best dress of blue calico with white trim that Martha had helped her alter to suit current fashions, and felt a surge of pleasure at the appreciation in Grant's eyes when she emerged from the house. The town square had been transformed for the celebration, with bunting hanging from buildings and tables laden with food prepared by the community's women. Children ran about waving small flags, while men gathered to discuss crops and cattle prices. A makeshift dance floor had been constructed in front of the church, where local musicians were setting up instruments. "I didn't know there would be dancing," Olivia commented as they walked among the festivities. Grant looked momentarily uncomfortable. "I'm not much of a dancer," he admitted. "But I'd be honored if you'd stand up with me for one song." The simple request, delivered with such earnest formality, made Olivia smile. "I would love to." As the afternoon progressed, Olivia was introduced to what seemed like the entire population of the small settlement. Most expressed surprise at seeing Grant participating in the festivities, and more than one cast knowing glances between him and Olivia. "You've caused quite a stir," she teased as they shared a piece of apple pie at one of the communal tables. The reclusive Mr. Forrester, socializing like a regular person. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "I have good reason to break my habits," he said, his eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her blush. As evening approached and lanterns were lit around the square, the musicians began playing in earnest. Couples took to the dance floor, from gray-haired elders to giggling teenagers. Grant watched the proceedings with apparent trepidation. "We don't have to dance if you'd rather not," Olivia offered, noting his discomfort. Grant shook his head. "No, I want to." He stood and offered his hand with formal courtesy. "Miss Evans, may I have this dance?" Olivia placed her hand in his, allowing him to lead her to the edge of the dance floor. The musicians struck up a waltz, and Grant carefully positioned his hand at her waist, keeping a respectful distance between them as they began to move. His steps were hesitant at first, but he found the rhythm quickly, guiding her with surprising grace for a man who claimed not to be a dancer. As they circled the floor, Olivia became aware of eyes following them the town, watching the progression of what was evidently considered a noteworthy courtship. "Everyone is staring," she murmured. "Let them," Grant replied, his voice low and intimate. "All I see is you." The simple declaration made Olivia's heart soar. As the music continued, Grant gradually drew her closer, their bodies moving in perfect harmony. By the time the waltz ended, the respectful distance had diminished considerably, and Olivia could feel the solid warmth of his chest against hers. They remained on the dance floor for 2 more songs before Grant led her to a quieter area at the edge of the square. The night air was cool after the heat of the day, the sky ablaze with stars. "I'd like to show you something," Grant said, offering his arm. "It's not far." Curious, Olivia allowed him to guide her away from the festivities and down a small path that led to the town's modest church. Behind the white clapboard building lay a cemetery, peaceful in the moonlight. Grant led her through the gate and along a row of markers until they reached a small, well-tended grave. The headstone was simple but beautiful, bearing 2 names. Emma Forrester, beloved wife Samuel Forrester, cherished son. Fresh wildflowers had been placed at the base of the stone. "I brought these this morning," Grant explained quietly. "I wanted to tell them about you before tonight." Olivia felt tears prick her eyes. "What did you tell them?" Grant turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. In the moonlight, his expression was solemn but without the crushing grief she'd seen when they first met. "I told Emma that I'd kept my promise about the cradle," he said. "And I told them both that I've met someone who makes me want to live again, not just survive. Someone who looks at me and doesn't see only a tragedy, but a man who might still have something to offer." Olivia's heart seemed to expand in her chest, too full of emotion for words. Instead, she reached up to touch his face, tracing the scar along his jawline with gentle fingers. "You have so much to offer, Grant Forrester," she whispered. "So much love still to give." Grant's eyes, silver in the moonlight, searched hers. "I never thought I'd feel this way again," he admitted. "It terrifies me." "Me too," Olivia confessed. "But some things are worth being afraid for." Slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, Grant lowered his head until his lips met hers. The kiss was tentative at first, almost questioning, but when Olivia responded, it deepened into something more certain, a promise, a beginning. When they finally parted, Grant rested his forehead against hers, his breathing uneven. "I'm falling in love with you, Olivia Evans," he said, the words sounding as if they'd been dragged from the depths of his soul. "God help me, I don't want to fight it anymore." Joy bloomed within her, bright and fierce. "Then don't," she replied simply. "Because I'm falling in love with you too." They stood together in the peaceful cemetery, the past and future somehow meeting in this quiet moment of acknowledgement. When Grant finally offered his arm to lead her back to the celebration, Olivia felt as if something fundamental had shifted in her world, as if she had finally found the place she was meant to be. The remainder of summer passed in a golden haze for Olivia. Grant visited the Evans homestead almost daily now, no longer bothering with pretexts. Thomas and Martha welcomed him warmly, treating him like family already, though no formal declarations had been made about his intentions toward Olivia. In late August, as the first hint of autumn crispness touched the air, Grant invited Olivia to his homestead for Sunday dinner after church services. The invitation, delivered with unusual nervousness, made Olivia suspect this visit would be different from their previous encounters. She dressed with special care that morning, selecting a rose-colored dress that Martha assured her brought a becoming flush to her cheeks. Grant met them at church, sitting beside Olivia for the first time rather than in his customary back pew. After the service, he shook hands with the pastor and neighbors, seeming more comfortable among the congregation than Olivia had ever seen him. "You're different today," she observed as they rode toward his homestead afterward. Grant glanced at her, a small smile playing around his mouth. "Am I? More at ease. Almost. Happy. I am happy," he said simply. "Happier than I thought possible again." His homestead, too, seemed different. The cabin had been meticulously cleaned, curtains now hung at the windows, and fresh flowers adorned the table. A delicious aroma wafted from the cooking pot, suspended over the fire. "You've been busy," Olivia commented, noting other changes: new shelves holding his books, a comfortable-looking rocking chair near the fireplace, a colorful quilt spread across the bed. "I've been thinking about the future," Grant replied, helping her remove her light shawl. "About what I want my life to look like going forward." There was an intentionality in his words that made Olivia's pulse quicken. She busied herself arranging the wildflowers she'd brought while Grant served the meal, a surprisingly sophisticated venison stew with biscuits and fresh vegetables from his garden. They ate companionably, discussing the approaching harvest and the town's plans for a fall festival. As they finished, Grant seemed to grow increasingly nervous, his fingers tapping against the table in an uncharacteristic display of restlessness. "Would you like to see the apple trees?" he asked suddenly. "They've grown considerably since you last visited." Outside, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the property. The apple saplings had indeed flourished, their slender trunks now sturdy enough to support themselves without stakes. "They're thriving," Olivia commented. "You have a gift with growing things." Grant stood beside her, looking out across his land with an expression that combined pride and uncertainty. "I've been thinking about expansion," he said. "Adding more cattle, perhaps some sheep. The south pasture could support a larger herd with proper management." "That sounds like an excellent plan," Olivia encouraged. "It would require more help than I can manage alone," he continued, his voice carefully measured. "And the cabin? It's sufficient for a single man, but it would need expansion for a family." Olivia's heart began to race. "A family?" Grant turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "Olivia," he said, his voice suddenly hoarse with emotion. "When you came upon me building that cradle, I was a man trapped in grief, fulfilling a promise to ghosts. I never imagined that same day would mark the beginning of my return to life." Tears pricked Olivia's eyes as Grant continued, his words gaining strength and certainty. "These past months with you have shown me that it's possible to honor what I've lost while still embracing what might be. Emma and Samuel will always be part of me, but my heart has room for more love for you, for the family we might build together." Slowly, with a grace that belied his usual practical manner, Grant lowered himself to one knee, still holding Olivia's hands in his. "I know I'm not the man you probably dreamed of as a girl," he said, his eyes never leaving hers. "I'm older, I carry scars both visible and hidden, and this life out here is harder than what you knew in Boston. But if you'll have me, I promise to love you with everything I have left to give. Olivia Evans, will you marry me?" Tears flowed freely down Olivia's cheeks now, but they were tears of joy. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, Grant Forrester, I will marry you." Grant rose to his feet and pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that spoke of both gratitude and promise. When they finally parted, he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet pouch. "It was my mother's," he explained, tipping a delicate gold ring with a small pearl into his palm. "Not as fine as what you might have had in Boston, but it's perfect," Olivia interrupted, offering her hand so he could slip the ring onto her finger. It fit as if made for her. As the sun began to set, casting the land in hues of gold and crimson, Grant and Olivia walked arm in arm among the apple saplings, discussing plans for their shared future, the expansion of the cabin, the combining of their lives, the children they hoped would someday climb these very trees. "There's something else I want to show you," Grant said, leading her back toward the cabin. On the porch, covered with the same canvas tarp that had once protected the cradle, stood something large and rectangular. With ceremonial solemnity, Grant removed the covering to reveal a beautiful oak chest, its surface carved with the same wildflower pattern that had adorned the cradle. "I've been working on it in the evenings," he explained, "for you to store your trousseau, and later, perhaps, baby clothes and christening gowns." Olivia ran her fingers over the exquisite carving, overwhelmed by the love represented in each careful detail. "It's magnificent, Grant. I'll treasure it always." That evening, as Grant rode with her back to her uncle's homestead to formally ask for Thomas's blessing on their engagement, Olivia felt a sense of rightness so profound it brought tears to her eyes again. The Montana landscape, bathed in starlight, no longer seemed wild and intimidating, but full of promise, a fitting backdrop for the life they would build together. Thomas and Martha received the news with obvious delight and no surprise whatsoever. After congratulations and a toast with Thomas's best whiskey, the two men retreated to the study to discuss practical matters, while Martha hugged Olivia fiercely. "I knew from the moment he offered to help with the cattle that he was falling in love with you," her aunt confessed, "but I wasn't sure if he would allow himself to embrace it. I'm so glad he found the courage." "So am I," Olivia whispered, the pearl ring catching the lamplight as she twisted it on her finger, still marveling at the reality of what it represented. The wedding was set for October, when the harvest would be complete, and before winter weather made travel difficult for the few distant relatives who might attend. In the meantime, Grant worked tirelessly to expand his cabin, adding a proper bedroom, and enlarging the main living area, with help from Thomas and neighbors who seemed genuinely pleased to see the reclusive widower preparing for a new chapter in his life. Olivia divided her time between helping her aunt with the wedding preparations and learning everything she could about running a frontier household. Martha taught her to preserve vegetables for winter, to make soap from rendered fat and lye, to bake bread in a cast-iron oven, and dozens of other skills she'd never needed in Boston but would be essential in her new life. In late September, a letter arrived from Boston. Olivia's trust administrator had approved the early release of her funds due to her impending marriage, and a bank draft for a substantial sum was enclosed. That evening, as she and Grant sat on her uncle's porch watching the sunset, she showed him the letter. "This changes things," she said softly. "We could build a larger house right away, buy more cattle, perhaps hire help for the heavy work." Grant was quiet for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. "Your money is yours, Olivia. I didn't ask you to marry me for financial advantage." "I know that," she assured him, taking his hand. "But I want us to build our future together, with all the resources available to us. This isn't my money or your money, it's ours." The distinction seemed important to Grant, who had lived so independently for so long. Finally, he nodded. "We'll be practical. Some improvements to the property make sense, but I don't want to change everything at once. There's value in building slowly, in seeing what we truly need rather than what seems desirable in the moment." His wisdom impressed Olivia, who had grown up in a world where money was spent freely on comforts and luxuries. "We'll decide together," she promised. "Partners in everything." The wedding day dawned clear and crisp, the aspen trees surrounding the small church ablaze with autumn gold. Olivia wore a dress of ivory silk ordered from Chicago, with lace at the collar and cuffs that Martha declared made her look like an angel. A crown of late blooming wildflowers adorned her dark hair, which fell in loose curls down her back at Grant's specifically expressed preference. The church was filled to capacity not just with local families, but with people from neighboring settlements who had heard the story of the reclusive widower and the Boston lady who had helped him find his way back to life. The ceremony was simple but deeply moving, with Grant's voice strong and sure as he recited his vows. At the moment when the pastor pronounced them husband and wife, a shaft of sunlight broke through the clouds, illuminating the altar in golden light. Martha later declared it was surely a sign of blessing from above, and Olivia, despite her practical nature, found herself inclined to agree. The celebration afterward was joyous, with food and music and dancing that continued well into the evening. Grant, no longer hesitant or uncertain, danced with his bride as if they'd been partners for years, his eyes never leaving her face. As twilight fell and they prepared to depart for their new home, Olivia found herself momentarily overwhelmed by the magnitude of the change in her life. 6 months ago, She had been a Boston spinster destined for a life of quiet dependency on relatives. Now she was a frontier wife, about to begin a new life with a man she loved beyond measure. Grant, sensing her momentary hesitation, drew her aside from the well-wishers. "Are you having second thoughts?" he asked, his expression concerned. Olivia shook her head, squeezing his hands. "Not at all. I was just thinking about how much has changed since I found you building that cradle alone on your porch. How a moment of shared grief opened the door to so much joy." Grant's eyes softened with understanding. "I believe Emma and Samuel sent you to me," he said quietly. "I believe they wanted me to find happiness again, to build the family we had dreamed of together." The sentiment, expressed with such simple faith, brought tears to Olivia's eyes. "Then we'll honor their memory by living fully and loving deeply," she promised. Their arrival at the homestead, their home, now was marked by a surprise Grant had somehow managed to keep secret from Olivia. The cabin, illuminated by lanterns hung from the porch rafters, had been transformed. New curtains hung at the windows, a colorful rug covered the previously bare floor, and in the corner of the main room stood a new piece of furniture, a writing desk equipped with paper, ink, and several blank journals. "For your stories," Grant explained as Olivia ran her fingers over the smooth surface. "I want you to write about frontier life, as you said you wished to. Perhaps someday our children will read your words and understand how this land was settled by people with courage and dreams." The thoughtfulness of the gift moved Olivia deeply. "Our children," she repeated softly. "I like the sound of that." Grant drew her into his arms, his expression a mixture of desire and tenderness. "I never thought I would say those words again," he admitted. "Never thought I would want to. But with you, Olivia Forrester, I want everything: a lifetime of shared days and nights, children to raise, a legacy to build together." Their first night as husband and wife was a revelation, tender, passionate, and marked by the deep connection of two people who had found in each other not just love, but understanding and acceptance of all they had been and all they hoped to become. In the quiet aftermath, as they lay entwined in the darkness of their new bedroom, Olivia rested her head on Grant's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I found you building a cradle for a child you lost," she murmured. "Perhaps someday soon you'll build another for a child we'll welcome together." Grant's arms tightened around her, his voice thick with emotion as he replied, "Nothing would make me happier, my love. Nothing at all." And as they drifted to sleep, wrapped in each other's embrace, the Montana wind whispered through the apple saplings outside, trees that would grow strong and tall, bearing fruit for the family that would flourish alongside them in the years to come. 1 year later, on a perfect autumn day much like their wedding day, Olivia sat in the rocking chair on their expanded porch, watching as Grant put the finishing touches on a new cradle. This one, crafted from the same oak as her hope chest, featured carvings of both wildflowers and apple blossoms, a perfect union of past and future. "It's beautiful," she said, one hand resting on her swollen belly where their child grew strong and active. "Even more beautiful than the first." Grant looked up, his face alight with a happiness that no longer seemed foreign or guilty. "Different," he corrected gently. "Each cradle, like each child, has its own beauty." Olivia nodded, understanding the distinction. In the years since their marriage, Grant had spoken more openly about Emma and Samuel, integrating their memory into the fabric of their shared life rather than keeping them segregated in a place of untouchable grief. Photos of his first wife and son now stood alongside their wedding portrait in the main room of their home, a visual reminder that love expanded rather than diminished when given the chance to grow. "What shall we name this one?" she asked, a question they discussed but not resolved. Grant set down his tools and came to kneel beside her chair, placing his hand over hers on her belly. "If it's a girl, I still like the name Rose, after your mother," he said. "And if it's a boy, Thomas, after my uncle who brought us together," Olivia suggested. "Or perhaps Samuel, to honor your son." Grant's eyes glistened with emotion. "Samuel Thomas Forrester," he said softly. "I think that would be perfect." As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, casting long golden rays across the thriving homestead, Olivia looked out at what they had built together in just 1 year: the expanded house, the growing herd, the vegetable garden and orchard, and most importantly, the foundation of a family rooted in both remembrance and hope. "I never knew it was possible to be this happy," she confessed, leaning into Grant's embrace as he stood behind her chair, his hands gently massaging her shoulders. "Nor did I," he replied, bending to press a kiss to the top of her head. "But I'm grateful every day that you found me that afternoon, that you saw past my grief to the man I could become again with you." As darkness fell and the stars emerged one by one, Grant and Olivia Forrester remained on their porch, planning their future, honoring their past, and embracing the beautiful present they had created together, a testament to the healing power of love and the promise of new beginnings, even in the aftermath of profound loss.